I never imagined that something as simple as a family dinner could tear apart the foundation of my marriage. Sitting in the car, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, I replayed the events in my mind. The slap, the silence, the look on my wife's face. My cheeks still burned, not just from the sting of the slap, but from the realization that the woman I married, the woman I thought loved me, had chosen her mother over me in the most humiliating way possible. 027. It started as any ordinary evening. Malene had insisted we attend dinner at her parents' house despite my reservations. Gloria, her mother, had never liked me from the first time we met. She made it clear that she thought her daughter was settling by marrying me. "He's not from the kind of family we associate with," she had whispered to her husband once, thinking I wouldn't hear. I always heard. I tolerated her passive-aggressive remarks, snide comments, and the way she looked at me as if I were some unwelcome insect in her home. I endured it all because I thought Malene was worth it. 106. That night, everything changed. Dinner was in full swing, the room filled with the usual clatter of silverware and forced laughter, Gloria boasting about how perfect her life was. I had gotten up to refill my glass when it happened. I accidentally brushed against Gloria as I turned, nothing more than a slight touch, but in her eyes it was a crime worthy of punishment. 132. Before I could process what was happening, her hand connected with my face, a sharp slap that echoed through the room. Silence fell. Every eye turned to me, and the weight of their judgment pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. My ears rang, my mind scrambled to understand. Gloria stared at me, lips curled in disgust as she spat out words that burned just as much as her slap. "How dare you touch me, you disgusting man! Clean my dress and get out!" 2:11. I stood there frozen, not from fear, but because my mind refused to believe what had just happened. This wasn't a mistake. She meant to humiliate me. Worse, she expected me to accept it. I turned to Malene, sure she would step in, tell her mother she was overreacting. But no. Malene's gaze was cold, empty. And then she said the words that twisted my gut. Apologize to her or leave. 2:55. I could have laughed at how ridiculous it was. Apologize for what? For existing in Gloria's presence? For daring to stand too close? For breathing the same air? But instead, I searched Malene's face for something. Remorse, regret, hesitation. But there was nothing. Indifference. That was the moment I knew everything had changed. 3:25. For years, I had bent over backward to prove myself to this family. I tolerated their judgments, their veiled insults, their comparisons to the men they thought Malene should have married. I did it all for her. And now, when I needed her the most, she sided with them without hesitation. 3:44. I wasn't going to apologize. I was done. With a quiet nod, I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't argue. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break, because I wasn't broken. I was angry, but beneath that anger was something sharper, resolve. 4:03. I stepped outside into the cool night air. My mind raced, but for the first time in a long while, it wasn't clouded by the need to please anyone. I saw everything with painful clarity. They thought I'd walked out in shame, that I was weak, that they had won. They were wrong. I wasn't, leaving in defeat. I was leaving to prepare a surprise they would never forget. 4:36. I dialed Carter, my best friend since college. He thrived on exposing people's secrets, and I knew that if there was anything to uncover about Gloria, he'd find it. The phone barely rang twice before he picked up. "What's up?" he asked casually. "Gloria," I said, my voice steady. There was a pause before a low chuckle. "Finally ready to fight back?" "More than ready." 5:02. "Good. Give me a few hours." I ended the call and leaned back in the car, staring at the sky. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting even. It was about respect, something I should have demanded a long time ago. I had spent years convincing myself that love was about sacrifice, that enduring cruelty was just part of the deal. But tonight, I saw the truth. Malene never respected me. She never saw me as her equal. And without respect, what was left? 5:58. The drive home felt longer than usual, the silence in the car pressing down on me. My cheeks still tingled from the slap, but the real wound was deeper, a cut through my pride, my dignity, my marriage. Malene had looked me in the eye and told me to apologize or leave. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't flinched. She hadn't even considered standing by me. The woman I had vowed to love and protect had made it clear where I stood in her life. The realization twisted in my gut like a knife. 6:47. I closed my eyes, leaned back in the car, breathing deeply, trying to steady myself. The past few years flashed through my mind. Every argument, every dismissal, every moment I'd brushed. Aside to keep the peace, I had ignored it all. The way Malene corrected me in front of her family, how she always took her mother's side, how she barely looked at me anymore, as if I had faded into the background of her life. I had told myself it was stress. Marriage was work. She just needed time. 7. But now, sitting in the stillness of my car, I saw the truth. Malene had stopped respecting me long before tonight, and I had let it happen. 7:35. The door opened suddenly, spilling light onto the porch. Malene stood there, arms crossed, her face unreadable. "You're back early," she said, as if I had just returned from running errands. I walked past her, ignoring her comment. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. I headed straight for the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady, but my pulse hammering beneath my skin. 8:02. "Are you going to talk to me?" she asked, standing in the doorway, watching me. "Talk to you about what?" My voice was calm but had an edge to it. "You embarrassed my mother tonight?" she said, her tone defensive. I laughed bitterly. "I embarrassed her?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Malene, she slapped me in front of everyone and you told me to apologize." 8:53. Malene shifted uncomfortably, her arms tightening around herself. "You should have just apologized and let it go," she said. "Let it go?" I barked. "She humiliated me in front of everyone and you want me to just let it go?" 9:04. She sighed, exasperated. "She overreacted, I admit that. But you know how she is. She values respect." I laughed bitterly. She values respect? The woman who just disrespected me in front of everyone? I stepped closer, my voice cold. "What about you, Malene? Do you value respect? Because you didn't give me any tonight." Yon 9:25. Her hesitation spoke volumes. I smirked, the truth settling like ice in my veins. I thought so. 9:49. "What would you do if I slapped your mother in front of everyone?" I asked quietly. Malene's lips parted, but no words came. The silence was deafening, and the truth hit me. She wouldn't have stood by me. She wouldn't have considered it. 10:31. "You stopped respecting me a long time ago," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I just refused to see it." 11:03. I turned and walked upstairs, ignoring her calls. I needed time to think, not about fixing this, but about what came next. Because tonight wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. It sounds like you're working on a story that involves some heavy emotional moments and complex relationships. The scene you've shared conveys a lot of tension and drama, with a sense of betrayal and a struggle for power. There's a pivotal moment where the character's world unravels and the truth about Gloria's deception comes to light. It looks like this sets up an intense turning point, particularly with Richard now facing the consequences of years of lies and manipulation. Are you looking to develop this scene further, or is there something specific you'd like help with, like refining dialogue or expanding on the emotional beats? Let me know how I can assist you. It seems like you're sharing a story of transformation, a journey of personal liberation after years of emotional turmoil. The protagonist goes through a series of betrayals by his wife, Gloria, and by his ex-lover, Meline, who both play pivotal roles in his suffering. But as their lies and facades unravel, he finds solace in his freedom, no longer burdened by their toxic dynamics. The narrative explores themes of betrayal, self-discovery, and the hard truth of finally letting go. It's a story of reclaiming power after being manipulated, and it's both painful and liberating. The protagonist doesn't seek revenge, but rather emotional release and closure, something many people can relate to when they've been emotionally drained by others. In the end, his freedom doesn't come with fireworks, but in quiet acceptance, letting go of the past and accepting the fresh start ahead. What struck you the most about this story, or is there a specific element you'd like to discuss further? I raised my glass to new beginnings. Carter clinked his against mine, a silent toast to living for myself at last. As we drank, I knew this was just the beginning of the life I'd always been meant to live. Life after Meline was strange, not because I missed her, but because I had spent so many years defining myself through the lens of our marriage. I had been her husband, the man constantly battling for her approval, the one fighting against the shifting tides of a marriage already sinking. But now I was just me, and I had to figure out what that meant. The first thing I did was purge. Everything that reminded me of my old life, furniture, dishes, even the clothes Meline had once picked out for me. Everything went, either sold or donated. I wanted nothing to do with the person I had been while with her. I wasn't angry, but I was bitter, and all I wanted was a fresh start. So I moved into a new apartment. Nothing extravagant, but something that felt like mine. I changed my phone number, cut ties with anyone who still saw me as Meline's ex-husband, and altered my daily routine. I started going to new places, meeting new people. It was liberating. For the first time in years, I could wake up in the morning and simply breathe, without the weight of obligations or expectations. Carter noticed the change. One evening, as we sat on a rooftop bar, he leaned in and said, "You finally look like a man who's not carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." I smirked. "That's because I'm not." "Damn right. So what's next? You going to start dating again?" I stared at the drink in my hand, exhaling. "Not yet." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not? You're a free man. No strings, no baggage. Just go out and have fun." I chuckled. "You think jumping into something new is the answer?" He shrugged. "I think letting yourself enjoy life is the answer." For years, I had been so focused on surviving my marriage that I'd forgotten how to actually live. Now, I had the time to figure out who I was outside of being someone's husband, to do the things I'd put off, and to be selfish for once. "All right," I said, setting my drink down. "Let's start with something small." Carter grinned. "Now we're talking." Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I went to the gym not because I wanted a revenge body, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned, the ones Meline didn't approve of. I traveled on a whim, took weekend trips, and met new people who had no idea about my past. For the first time, I was living without someone else's expectations, and it was intoxicating. One night, Carter convinced me to attend a social event, a gallery opening downtown. I wasn't particularly interested in art, but I figured, why not? We arrived, and the place was buzzing with energy. Abstract paintings lined the walls, and people walked around with glasses of champagne, pretending to understand what they were looking at. No overthinking tonight, Carter nudged me. Just enjoy yourself. I rolled my eyes. I know how to have fun. Do you, though? He teased. I chuckled, shaking my head. Shut up and get me a drink. As Carter wandered off to the bar, I strolled through the gallery, taking in the paintings. Some were impressive, others just expensive scribbles. That's when I saw her. She stood near a large canvas, arms crossed, tilting her head as she studied the piece. There was something about her, a quiet confidence that made you look twice. Her dark, wavy hair cascaded over one shoulder. She wasn't trying to stand out, but she did. Without thinking, I walked over to her. You actually understand this? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. And you don't? I grinned. Guilty? She smirked. It's a metaphor for transformation. I glanced at the painting, a chaotic mix of colors bleeding into each other. Right, definitely got that. She laughed softly. Liar. I shrugged. Maybe, but you make it sound interesting. Her eyes studied me, sizing me up. You don't seem like the art gallery type. I'm not, I admitted. But I'm trying new things. She nodded. Good for you. I take it you actually like this stuff? She smiled. It's more than just paint on a canvas. It's about stories, experiences, emotions. Kind of like life, really. I found myself intrigued, not just by her words, but by the way she carried herself. Confident, unfiltered. Maybe I need a better guide, I said. Maybe you do, she replied. Before I could say anything else, Carter appeared, drinks in hand. Here you go, he said, handing me a glass. He looked between me and the woman beside me, a grin spreading across his face. I see you've made a friend. I turned to her. I didn't catch your name. Sienna, she said, offering a firm handshake. Nice to meet you, Sienna. Carter shot me a knowing look, but for once, I ignored him. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't replaying what went wrong or wondering what could have been. I was just in the moment, and damn, it felt good. Later that night, as I walked through the city streets, I found myself smiling, not because I'd met someone new or because I was finally moving on, but because I had finally let go. For years, I had been stuck in a cycle, fighting for respect, for love, for a place to belong. Now I realized I didn't need to fight anymore. I didn't need Malene. I didn't need validation from her or her family. I just needed to live. I looked up at the night sky, breathing in the cool air, and knew one thing for sure. The best part of my life was only just beginning. There's something poetic about watching the people who once looked down on you fall apart, not because you actively sought revenge, but because life has a way of balancing the scales. I had a front row seat to the chaos unfolding. Gloria had lost everything. Her high society friends turned their backs on her. Richard took half of everything in the divorce, and the media wouldn't let her scandal die. She tried clawing her way back into relevance, but her name had been tainted beyond repair. The final blow? Her bank accounts were frozen after an investigation into financial fraud Carter had uncovered. Turns out funneling money through shell companies isn't a good long-term strategy. She went from living in a mansion with housekeepers at her beck and call to a modest condo in a neighborhood she once sneered at. The woman who had once told me I was beneath her daughter had now become a cautionary tale. And I was thriving. One afternoon, Carter and I sat at a small outdoor cafe watching the world pass by. You hear about Gloria? He asked, taking a sip of his coffee. I smirked. I try not to keep up, but let me guess. She's in trouble again? More than trouble, Carter chuckled. She got evicted from her condo. Apparently, she couldn't keep up with the payments. I raised an eyebrow. You're kidding. Nope, he said, leaning back in his chair, looking entirely too pleased. She's staying with some distant relative now, trying to sell her jewelry to stay afloat. I whistled slowly. The mighty have truly fallen. Guess karma finally caught up with her. Carter smirked. Guess so. We sat in silence for a moment, letting it all settle. Years ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting here, completely unaffected by the mess Gloria and Malene had made, I wouldn't have believed them. But now? Now, I felt nothing. No anger, no resentment, no desire to rub it in. Just peace. And that was enough. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Hello? There was a pause, then a hesitant voice said, It's me, Malene. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. What do you want? She hesitated. I wanted to talk. I leaned against my desk, waiting. She was the one who walked away. She was the one who made her choice. Now she was reaching out. Malene, there's nothing left to say, I said, my tone even. She let out a shaky breath. I know. I needed to hear your voice. I closed my eyes briefly. Once, those words would have meant something to me. But now they were just echoes of a past I had no desire to relive. You're moving on, aren't you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Malene, I am. A long silence stretched between us. Then she laughed, a soft, bitter sound. I guess I always thought you'd wait for me. I shook my head. That was your mistake. She sniffled. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know why I called. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know, I said quietly. Take care of yourself, she whispered. You too. And with that, the last piece of my past was finally put to rest. A week later, I found myself back at the gallery where I had met Sienna. I wasn't expecting to see her again, but there she was, standing by a new painting. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulder, completely absorbed in the art. I hesitated, then walked up beside her, pretending I knew what I was looking at. You still terrible at this? She asked, glancing over at me. Absolutely, I replied. She chuckled. At least you're honest. I tilted my head at the new painting. This one's different. More chaotic. She nodded. It's about rebirth. The artist painted it after going through something that completely changed their life. I studied it for a moment. Seems fitting. She raised an eyebrow. Why's that? I met her gaze. Because that's exactly what I'm doing. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. Starting over. I nodded. Something like that. She took a sip of her drink, watching me closely. Well, for what it's worth, I think new beginnings are a good thing. I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Yeah, I think so too. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just saying it. I meant it.